Hello everybody and welcome to History Bite number 93, dated October 26th, 2020. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled, Americans Should Not Fear Constitutional Reform. Recently I watched a YouTube video of late former U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens being interviewed about one of his books, specifically the book entitled 6 Amendments and Why We Need to Change the Constitution. The interviewer proceeded to begin questioning Justice Stevens in this format. She said, "So you want to amend the Constitution?" Now, when I saw that, I was rather dismayed. But in reality, her reaction is likely representative of how the vast majority of Americans feel about reforming the U.S. Constitution and updating it to reflect current problems and present needs. The U.S. Constitution, folks, is not a sacred cow, nor is it on the level of the Ten Commandments. The Constitution of the United States is a parchment document that the framers knew very well would outlive itself if not kept up to date. That is why they wrote Article 5 into the document, which prescribes the methodology to amend it. All right? And so far, that has been done 27 times by way of congressionally enacted constitutional amendments that have been sent to the states and ratified therein. Why are Americans so afraid of this today? Some argue that the framers' work is essentially so perfect that it should only be touched or tampered with in the most pressing of circumstances. Others argue that too much constitutional reform could send the nation into anarchy. After all, this is the only constitution we've ever known. Not to say that's the only constitution we've ever had, but of course, it is the only one we've ever known. But I say both of these arguments are nonsense, and it is not likely that the framers would agree either. For sure, they would be very flattered that the Constitution that they gave us 230 years ago is still in effect and has only been amended 27 times since it came into operation. And you can't even really count the first 10 because they should have been a part of the original document anyway. So that only leaves the remaining 17, which reflect the changing nation over time, as well as fixed certain areas of our structure, governmental structure, which we deemed at the time to be broken. All right? Now, the framers would, however, be very, in spite of being flattered, they would be very perplexed that the document that they drafted for a nation of barely 3 million people that was still predominantly agricultural and only stretched as far west from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River has been amended so very little. And if that wasn't enough, perhaps even more so, that we're still even using the document, period. All right? They would be very, very confused at that. The framers, for sure, were not a generation of weak men. They were very bold. They were not scared to go into uncharted territory. All right? The Constitutional Convention of 1787, of and in itself, was going into uncharted territory. All right? Because who knew what was going to come out of that convention? Thankfully, what came out of that convention was something workable. And that's what they were designing. Though the words of the Constitution certainly appear that the framers were trying to create something that would last till kingdom come, but that's not the case, as I've explained before. They were drawing something up that they knew could get ratified quickly and we could get back to business as usual. They were not designing a document to last forever and for all times. Again, which is why they put Article 5 into it, all right, so that it could be amended to reflect an ever-changing society. And if we deemed it necessary and proper, to replace it altogether. We Americans today arguably do not share the same spirit of boldness that the framers had in going into uncharted territory and, wandering in the dark, hoping to create something mighty from a perilous situation. Granted, our times are not as, to me, dangerous as theirs were and insecure, which further, underlines my point that we have no reason to fear constitutional reform. The framers gave us the ability for constitutional reform whenever we deemed it necessary and proper through Article 5 and the amendment process. Why are we so scared to use it? Undoubtedly, there are so many areas of our constitutional structure which are broken in 2020 that are desperately screaming for reform and amendment. But alas, Americans lack the zeal, or maybe simply the knowledge, of how to fix it. Amendments, no, are not easy to get passed through the Congress, and even are more difficult than that to get ratified by at least 38 states, assuming that the proposed amendments make it out of the Congress. But, all right, as the late great author James Baldwin once said, not everything we face can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless we face it. And if Americans are too scared to face constitutional reform, then our document will fail in many regards to provide for the needs of a nation that is now more than 330 million people, all right? And certainly is the industrial powerhouse of the world. We are the world's predominant superpower, all right? And our Constitution needs to reflect that in many more ways, all right? Surely the framers gave us a great structure and foundation to work with. And I'm not suggesting that much of that, hardly any of that, essentially be changed. But there are certain other areas, especially with respect to politics, all right, and representation that do need amendment. Why we feel we are bound forever to the designs of those who lived in 1787 is beyond my comprehension. Founding Father and President Thomas Jefferson remarked in a letter to James Madison once that the world belongs to the living, okay? And that a constitution or law itself is only effectively good for 19 years. And if it is in existence longer than that, okay, it is in existence and rules by way of force, all right, and not by popular assent. I'm paraphrasing his statement, but you get the general gist of it. Now, Jefferson wasn't suggesting that every document automatically dies at the end of 19 years, but he was suggesting that with each passing generation, obviously, major changes will be needed to any law, and a constitution is not exempt from that, all right? And even George Washington himself, okay, who presided over the Constitutional Convention, something that both Jefferson and Adams were overseas and unable to attend. Washington himself said that he did not feel that his generation would be any wiser than generations to follow. And with these men, these mighty men who obviously had great foresight in many ways, endorsing the idea that the Constitution would constantly need to be updated is all the more reason why we, the people of today, should not fear the prospect of constitutional reform and should demand it, by contrast, demand it from the Congress. It has been done in the past. It can be done today. Thank you very much for listening to this History Bite. I hope I've opened your eyes a bit more on the subject of U.S. constitutional reform. If you have watched this video and have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, I humbly ask that you do so. Your support is very appreciated. Thanks again for listening to this. Take care, stay safe out there, and I will talk to you at the next one. Peace.